African Americans in New Orleans were many of those who bore the brunt of Hurricane Katrina when it made landfall on August 29, 2005. After one day, major levees had been breached, parts of the city had been submerged, and thousands had been unable to evacuate due to a lack of resources. Photographs and television footage of Katrina's aftermath in New Orleans show that the vast majority of those worst affected were black, in numbers disproportionate even to the large percentage of African Americans within the city. Many believe that since the majority of Katrina's victims were poor and black, they were considered expendable and did not warrant an urgent response. While there was a great deal of variance in terms of how different racial and class groups perceived the response, there was a delayed and weak reaction no matter what the reason might have been. For poor black families, the lack of funding and other assistance to help them rebuild significantly drained what little savings many may have had. As a result, their children had to be kept from school to help their families and were not able to attend college. This impacts future potential for social mobility.
Beyoncé tackles the omnipresent issue of race relations and police brutality in Lemonade most directly by showing Sabrina Fulton, Leslie McSpadden, and Gwen Carr, each holding a photo of their respective children, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and Eric Garner, all widely known victims of racism and police brutality. She shows these women who have remained strong in the face of the injustice and tragedy that has struck their lives, angry women who are eager to change their world for the better. Similar issues are felt within the black community of New Orleans. During Hurricane Katrina, one of the flood walls in the city called the Industrial Canal breached and flooded the 9th Ward, an extremely poor black neighborhood. Now, after the incident, there's a very common theory among black families from New Orleans that the canal was intentionally sabotaged by the government in order to try and save the more wealthy, white neighborhoods such as the French Quarter. While there is no proof of this, the mere fact that these communities believe this shows just how bad the relationship is and how little trust exists between the poor blacks of New Orleans and figures of authority such as the government.
At the end of the section, Accountability, Beyoncé describes how relationships can become extremely confining and abusive. She asks, "Did he make you forget your own name? Did he convince you he was a god? Did you get on your knees daily? Do his eyes close like doors? Are you a slave to the back of his head? Am I talking about your husband or your father?" Beyoncé connects this sentiment to Hurricane Katrina in a shot where she is seen lying in the middle of the Superdome. During Katrina, the Superdome was a last resort shelter for people who were forced to abandon their homes. Approximately 20,000 people were crammed into the stadium with limited food, supplies, and power for 5 days. The Superdome was a place of suffering, where individuals were completely trapped. Beyoncé juxtaposes this idea with the emotional cages that many black women find themselves in relationships.
Throughout much of Lemonade, Beyoncé depicts black women as being proud and extremely strong. Unapologetic matriarchs, unafraid to take their agency into their own hands and unafraid to embrace their own culture and identity. Many of the black women shown throughout the film are extremely bold in their movements and facial expressions. They are eager and ferocious in calling out the various oppressors in their lives, whether that be husbands, fathers, or the police and government. In addition, many of the women are shown with African print on their clothing, or face paint, which represents a pride in their own culture and their own identity. The strength and agency of black women was imperative in the aftermath of Katrina as well. Women stepped up and worked to rebuild homes, hire contractors, and wait in massive lines to obtain building permits, all the while also taking care of their children and families, looking for daycare services in schools, and finding jobs and places to live while they rebuilt their lives. Women were truly the leaders of their families in this time of crisis, and through their strength, their families survived the disaster and were able to make new lives after the storm.
In Lemonade, Beyoncé consistently uses water and fire as metaphors for baptism and rebirth. Beyoncé walks through water in the section Reformation to show her own healing and moving on from her pain. In Forgiveness, she says, "Baptize me, now that reconciliation is possible," signaling a new birth and life for her relationship. Lemonade brings home its point about acceptance and growth when Beyoncé references her grandmother who delivers the adage, "I was served lemons, but I made lemonade," declaring that not even the misfortune she had gone through was enough to bring her down. In comparison, many of the women in New Orleans led movements and organized efforts to rebuild and revitalize the city and its society. An example of this was the Ash Cultural Arts Center. Led by Carol Babel, this previous anchor in the Central City neighborhood became instrumental in the neighborhood's revitalization. The damage from Katrina led to a community discussion which brought about the expansion of the organization. The communities impacted by Hurricane Katrina, like Beyoncé, did not give up in their time of despair and were reborn, coming back stronger and full of life.